Why not try and touch as many people as you can, have as much of a positive impact as you can before you pass? And with Space Coyote, it's really about having fun and taking the light side of life, really enjoying what we have while we have it, while making decisions that are going to create the least harm for the environment. The entire brand is really an ode to friendship and togetherness and enjoyment. Another big principle that I'm always reminded of on my psychedelic journeys, and I fully embody in my daily life, is, I believe life is about pleasure. I believe it's about loving as much as you can, experiencing as much pleasure as you can without going too far and reducing your productivity. So finding that incredible balance of pleasure and productivity is where I try to be at all times.
Welcome to the Worth the Fight podcast, where we bring you powerful conversations centered around psychedelic integration and the practices that can help us massively level up our games. Integration means to make whole, and I'll be introducing you to wholehearted guests who, through their inspired transformational journeys, tell the Worth the Fight story. Together we will demystify psychedelics, ignite hope, and fast-track personal growth. I'm your host and guide, Matt Simpson, author of the book Worth the Fight, Acting for a Better World, a guide to spirituality, psychedelic medicines, and overcoming trauma. Buckle up, it's going to be a wild ride. Thank you so much for listening. Our next guest on the Worth the Fight podcast is Libby Cooper. She is the president and co-founder of Space Coyote, an artist and established contributor, advocate in the cannabis industry. Libby is the creative genius behind Space Coyote, crafting a brand that stands out from the noise and pulls people in. In less than 18 months, Libby has led Space Coyote to be a top 20 pre-roll brand in California. Space Coyote is now one of the fastest growing women-owned, operated cannabis companies and is sold in over 250 dispensaries. Libby truly believes in smokable, potent products, affirming that women can be stoners and being a stoner is celebratory. I really enjoyed my spirited conversation with Libby. She is mission-driven and doing very important work for our human family. I admire the way that she shows up for this natural medicine movement, our psychedelic renaissance, our collective awakening. It was an absolute joy pushing the edges and digging in with her. Libby walks the talk through our world with grace, owning that playful, live life to the fullest spirit. Check her out on Instagram. She's doing great work. Without further ado, I give you my conversation with Libby Cooper, the president and co-founder of Space Coyote. Thank you so much for listening. I'm here with Libby Cooper, the CEO of Space Coyote, a premium cannabis brand. Welcome to the Worth the Fight podcast, Libby.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
It's wonderful to connect with you. Let's dive on in. How have psychedelics positively impacted your journey?
Well, psychedelics have really affected my journey with a really positive spin, because I actually think that cannabis is a psychedelic and Space Coyote is my true passion. I am creating a company with my co-founder, Scott, that explores the psychedelic side of weed and really pushing the boundaries of what cannabis means to the general public. We have seen so much benefit from weed in the world, and as we're on the cusp of federal legalization, I think it's so important to educate and also just supply the best, highest quality plants that's around.
Awesome. Love it. I've gathered from researching you and your business and your company, Space Coyote, you're very purpose-driven and mission-driven. And I want to honor and applaud that. That always catches my eye to see somebody who's fully rooted in their calling. And the cannabis, like you said, we're knocking on the door for federal legalization and putting out honest vibes around what is possible with cannabis in terms of recreational and medicinal healing. So I want to honor your commitment to this collective awakening.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, you had said that, and I think that I agree with you, that cannabis is every bit as much of a psychedelic. To me, I've had some very profound experiences with cannabis, and it's almost too strong for me. I'm the guy that, you give a puff of weed at a party and I'm like, hey, where's the whiteboard? Let's start mapping the path to world to global peace.
Yeah.
Does anyone have a journal? I got to write some stuff down.
Yeah, it's very potent. And actually, Space Coyotes, we make infused pre-rolls, and also we have premium flower, and we're known for having the most potent stuff on the market, the most potent products. So it's definitely not for the faint of heart. You'd probably be the person who would take a couple puffs and just like either be talking someone's ear off or, eating all of your groceries in the fridge. But it's definitely macro dose. We're not talking about micro dose at Space Coyote.
Love that. How do you feel about set and setting in the cannabis movement, and then just the natural plant medicines and psychedelics movement as well?
Yeah, it's so important. I mean, I would love to hear about, what you think first, because I am, and this is me being fully transparent, I'm not an expert in psychedelics, but I love hearing other people's opinion and then sharing my own anecdotal experience. So I'm going to bounce that question right back to you.
Okay, touche.
What do you think of set and setting?
I think that it's imperative for the success of this psychedelic renaissance, or we can call it a psychedelic revolution. It was just titled that in the New York Times a few weeks back, that we're taking proper intention and making sure that we have, all of our ducks in a row in terms of our what and why for engaging medicines, a safe place to be, making sure that we're in a good, safe headspace, and factoring in the container in which we are consuming these medicines, especially right now with all of the heavy energy in our world and all of the suffering and struggling and yeah, that's how I'm looking at set and setting, and just it has a supreme value of kind of boxing out those said energies so people can look within and do their healing work. Or if it's a recreational setting, making sure that you're aware of the different variables and giving it forethought.
Mm-hmm. I couldn't agree more. I mean, when thinking about cannabis and working very much in the recreational space, I'm encouraging people to consume, and looking more at what I think a lot of people would say is sort of more like cut and dry psychedelics, quote unquote, which would be, mushrooms, LSD, DMT, the full spectrum of all of the compounds that I'm not listing as well. I don't encourage people to just consume recreationally. It's not my message and my ethos, but I think with cannabis, which is definitely the place that I'm the expert in, it's a very loose set and setting. We can be smoking a joint pretty much anywhere, obviously following the law, but there's so much flexibility to smoke a joint in your day, and you can really modify how much cannabis you're taking in, whether you want to have like a deep meditative high where you smoke so much that you actually, I don't know if you've done this, if you are that person at the party that only takes a puff and then takes out the whiteboard, but smoke so much that you get so stoned that you actually come back around, that you almost feel completely clear and sober again. That space is really interesting to play with. And then also there's, all the way at the other end of the spectrum, which is medical use. If you're sick, if you're in need in that moment for immediate relief. So I think set and setting in cannabis is much looser than other psychedelics, but I'm definitely a huge psychedelic proponent, and I really don't encourage the recreational use, because that was something that I really explored in my 20s, and there was no intention behind it. And I think if we're really trying to change the nation, bring on global peace, as you mentioned, it's going to take a lot of really strategic timing and place.
Love that. Love your angle and impressions.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's so much to this. This is an edge. I'll be honest with you that I haven't done much talking around. Back in 2015 or late 2014, I had a very profound healing with ayahuasca down in Costa Rica. I talk about that often as a very impactful, informative journey and retreat, and it allowed me to look within and to confront my demons and address the childhood sexual trauma that had my nervous system all garbled up, and that was at root of a lot of the destructive, impulsive behavior that I had. But cannabis, a big takeaway from that healing retreat was the importance of psilocybin on a smaller scale. And I think I had about 6 to 9 solo journeys back in 2015 where, and this was before there was a lot of information about it. I thought I was kind of losing my mind, but then at the same time, I was trusting everything that was inside, and I was feeling good and stronger and more clear. I would take probably a gram or two of psilocybin, and then I would take a few puffs of some Michigan homegrown, and poof,
Mm.
I was back in the ayahuasca ceremonies. It was eerie
Wow.
and bizarre and scary, but therapeutic. And it was what I needed on my journey. And again, there was 6 to 9 of those. And then it just kind of felt like I was done. And I haven't engaged cannabis since. But I'm curious, when I see inspired people like yourself or Stephen Kotler, he's one of my heroes. He's been on the podcast, Worth the Fight podcast number 15. He's the foremost expert in flow states, and he talks a lot about cannabis and creativity, and it's got me like a little bit curious. I'm like, maybe Matt, maybe you need to lighten up a little bit and take a puff or two, and yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, there's something so incredible about that flow state that you're talking about. And I actually trick myself into the flow state without cannabis. And I find that, and it's probably just personal preference, every mind and body is different, but I trick myself into the flow state even when I'm feeling creatively stagnant by listening to a specific song on repeat, and usually around song play number 5, while dancing, fully, no inhibitions, fully dancing, fully getting into it, the biggest exaggerated movements. I sort of get into this altered realm, and I can do the most fantastic creative work in that space. And cannabis will sustain it. So, if I smoke a little bit, I'll keep that going. But for me, weed alone doesn't get me into that realm. There are other tricks that I have to use, but I did have, and this is a fun story to share. Last summer, I had, I think, the most profound experience that I've ever had when I was smoking weed. I was lying on my couch, and I really felt like I could see what consciousness was. And I was able to really observe sort of that oneness that we all are as an infinite nothingness. And, black is the easiest way to describe it, just like pure black, but it wasn't actually a color. And then I saw the swirling of the light and the dark almost as two intertwining snakes. And this was, just weed. So it was just a truly, a psychedelic experience, but it was very much because I had already worked on some creative things. And I think it's all about piecing together the puzzle. Pretty similar to what you said about taking a gram or 2 of mushrooms and then a puff. It's these little pieces of the puzzle that create an experience. And, maybe if you hadn't taken a puff of that Michigan homegrown, you wouldn't have had that flashback into the ayahuasca journey. So it's so fascinating to hear everybody's story. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you for listening and for reflecting that back. And yeah, the notion that we have tools or practices to deploy. And I think Dan Engle says it best, when we talk about natural medicines or the full spectrum medicine of all these different compounds that shift our state of mind. And, they all there's so many different combinations and different medicines play different with certain medicines and so on. And, finding out, like I always say to my coaching clients, find out what works for you and go do that. But the way that you described, and you had said tricking yourself, I love that. Is synonymous with like the biohack. We're using movement, dance, and music and moving our body, with like you said, the most exaggerated dance imaginable. And I had a big smile on my face picturing with a big smile on your face, having fun and moving. And that would be a means to get into flow state. What are there any other hacks that or psychedelic integration practices, or just integration in general? I think that integration means to make whole. And a big part of this movement is to integrate these experiences into our day-to-day. Is there anything that comes to mind for you that is, are strong integration practices that help you live a healthy, happy, and strong service-driven life?
So this actually came from a DMT trip that I had towards the beginning of 2020. And I like to have these small reminders, because my biggest thing is the insignificantness of our life. Like we're such little specks, so insignificant. And I live here on Oahu, and I get this reminder every time I go into the ocean that there's so much energy in the ocean, and we are so small. And, if a wave came and crashed, or if, you get sucked down, like, you are powerless against this massive liquid force. And similar to our lives in general in the universe, that we're just so small. And this DMT trip that I had last year really just reminded me of that sentiment that, our lives are short, and, we're really not making that much of a difference in terms of the universe, or hopefully not making any difference. We should really just be part of the ecosystem and coexisting. But in that idea that nothing matters, I find so much purpose in my life. I find that, if I'm stressed or angry about something, if I'm upset, this reminder that, our lives are somewhat irrelevant, it gives me so much purpose. It's so much meaning in nothingness. And I'm a designer by trade. So everything that you see of Space Coyote actually is something that I've designed on my laptop. So it's, most of my work is me on my laptop and beautiful places looking out the window. And sometimes it can feel very, isolating to just, be working on something that I think, why am I doing this? I'm just encouraging consumerism and capitalism. And the most sustainable thing would be to, not have a company at all. That's something that I learned from Yvon Chouinard, which he's the founder of Patagonia. He made that realization in his book, Let My People Go Surfing, that, sustainability is a little bit of a farce, because the most sustainable thing is to not create. And so just tying all of these concepts together, I like to have a purpose-driven company and a purpose-driven life out of this notion that, we're not really making an impact that is that large. So why not do something that's so beyond ourselves that, why not try and touch as many people as you can, have as much of a positive impact as you can before you pass. And with Space Coyote, it's really about having fun and taking the light side of life, really enjoying what we have while we have it, while making decisions that are going to create the least harm for the environment. It's the entire brand is really an ode to friendship and togetherness and enjoyment. Another big principle that I'm always reminded of on my psychedelic journeys, and I fully embody in my daily life, is, I believe life is about pleasure. I believe it's about loving as much as you can, experiencing as much pleasure as you can without going too far and reducing your productivity. So finding that incredible balance of pleasure and productivity is where I try to be at all times. Does that even answer the question? It was very long-winded.
Yeah, I love what you're saying. And there's a lot that is coming up for me. The notion of nothing matters and just the paradoxical nature of being human, that and that is something that is deeply peaceful, or it promotes peace and well-being for me, that notion that that things don't matter. Like there's a paradox. They don't matter at all, but then they matter infinitely. So and I think that leaning in to the fact that, like you said, insignificance, by getting into the ocean and having healthy practices of surfing or taking time in nature and feeling that can be a source of fuel, an inspiration to serve our human family at a higher capacity and not putting so much pressure on ourselves.
Yes, totally.
Yeah, the way that you're describing, another thing that comes to mind is the infinite game and love for the sake of loving. And you had described brotherly and sisterly love. I don't remember exactly what you had said, but it was an amorous notion that is tied to your mission, and that idea that we might never get to that point of global peace or world peace or utopia, but going big and chasing that can be, it's the North Star that keeps everything in line and keeps all of our actions in line, and can be a measuring stick so we can monitor that pleasure and purpose. Like you had said, I think about pleasure and pain, and that we have to have a certain amount of pain to offset the pleasure. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but in terms of practices, like seeking out discomfort has been something that is heavy on my radar. My mentor, Akshay Nanavati, wrote a book called Fearvana that was endorsed by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And he's got a very powerful mantra, this idea that we find a worthy struggle, or struggle will find you. So finding the struggle in the integration process of getting into the cold water, of eating healthy, having discipline with our food and our diet, getting out, getting enough fitness, going for that workout when we don't feel like it, fasting, which can be super powerful and it can promote a lot of discomfort. But these are all practices that I believe create self-awareness and help us to integrate those peak psychedelic experiences.
Yes, definitely. I wrote this yesterday. I think it's very relevant to this. I said, I hope everyone I know finds peace, but more than that is joy and love and experiences that force us to grow. The inverse of ecstasy is suffering, and one can argue that you cannot experience one without the other. I wrote that because, similar to you, I have mentors, and it's a theme that keeps coming up year after year, and every time there is that suffering, there is so much room for growth. And I find that I create suffering for myself. If things are too good, I sort of start to have some inner chaos and, have to work through it, because I think it's this natural human response that, if we find that peace, we also find dissatisfaction, because we know that, oh my God, if we've reached peace now, like, what's the next level? And to get to that next level, you create hardship for yourself so that you can force yourself out of a place of what I consider contentment. I think contentment can be quite a dangerous place. And so for me, sometimes that is a mushroom journey. Sometimes I need to do something uncomfortable. Mushrooms aren't always the most comfortable for me, and that can push me to the next level. Other times it's just actually exactly what you said, fasting. So I wrote that yesterday while I was fasting. I used to have a practice of a dry fast, so not even water, once a week, but it became unsustainable because of how much I physically move my body. Just, I think, being in the jungle, being in the ocean, I've stopped the dry part of that fast. But it does, if you do a dry fast, it switches your body into autophagy really quickly, much faster than if you are drinking. But and autophagy is that cleansing mechanism of your body's basically garbage men cleaning out all the junk that's not performing at its highest level. But yeah, it's important that we all sort of remember this and we can use tools. And my question back to you is, if we both think you need suffering to experience the inverse, is it possible that there ever will be global peace? Because people will always be going through different things at different times and creating that discomfort for themselves. So the world would have to be so synced up for there to be peace all at once.
Well, I think, and this is what gives me so much hope, this notion of find a worthy struggle or struggle will find you. Right now, so many people are stuck in a struggle that's not a worthy struggle. And they're stuck in the BS. They're stuck in these limiting belief, bullshit incorporated scarcity programs. So I think that that's what this movement is about. We're telling a new story that is supported by the exponential sciences and exponential technologies. And this idea that if we need, and it makes sense, like when you think about it in a really banal mindset, that of course we need adversity to grow. We need to have an edge to push ourselves into. There'd be no way to experience growth without resistance. Aubrey Marcus did a wonderful podcast recently with Stephen Pressfield, who wrote the book, The War of Art. And they nailed it right on the head, that resistance. And I think that Stephen Pressfield, he mapped that for us with that beautiful short super boost to creativity. That was a book that was deeply meaningful to me, or it has been for my creative path. But that idea of reframing the resistance, reframing that as not something to be fearful of, but something to lean into, and to do it on our own terms, like you described, of doing the fasting and getting out and doing the fitness, and I've seen the cold plunge that you have, and taking the time to show up even when we don't want to, I think is so to, long-winded way to answer your question. In terms of like the overarching macro goals and global peace, that when we have perhaps a critical balance of people, or we hit a tipping point of people that are, or perhaps we as a society shift the values around some of these creature comforts that are drowning our spirits and numbing our spirits and dulling our spirits. If we shift the narrative around, the benefit and the value of leaning into the darkness, leaning into the pain, the adversity. This is a key part of my messaging, that notion that the degree to which we do lean into the darkness, our pain, the suffering, the mystery of the human experience is the very same degree to which we can stand and share and love in our light. So if we want to be the best versions of ourselves, we have to go to that other place too.
Yeah. I'm actually going to write that down because that was so beautiful. I completely agree. We have to go there.
Thank you. And what do you keeps people? What do you think keeps people from going there? There's so much suffering. There's so much mistrust. There's so much pain. There's certainly a lot of curiosity around this natural medicine movement, and cannabis being legal in 38 states is I think that's correct. We're on the verge of a federal legalization. The decrim movement, Oregon making that bold, trailblazing move for our for our nation and human family this last November. What do you think it is that keeps people from leaning into their edge?
Well, so I'm going to use my mom as an example, and my mom lives down the road from me here in Hawaii, and we have a very close relationship. So she'll enjoy listening to this. My mom grew up in the era of the war on drugs, and had a not to her fault, but had a very specific idea of drugs and incredibly negative connotation. So when I joined the cannabis industry at the beginning of 2016, it was definitely a shock. It was actually more of a shock to my father. My dad was seemingly very upset about it. And these are two very progressive individuals, very forward-thinking, moved from London to Silicon Valley, so two, really amazing places with a lot of different cultures and ideas, diversity of every kind. But what was really shocking to my mom was when at our Space Coyote launch party at the very beginning of 2019, I stood up in front of a crowd of friends, family, and industry professionals and said the origin story of Space Coyote, which the origin story of Space Coyote was born on mushrooms. To give you the short version, Scott and I, my co-founder Scott and I, gathered 25 friends in the desert in Joshua Tree for a meteor shower. And the meteor shower was perfectly timed with the new moon, so it was optimal viewing capabilities. And everybody naturally drank mushroom tea. A big batch was brewed. It was so much fun and really beautiful. Everybody's giggling, smoking a bunch of weed, and we're wearing these beautiful outfits. I was wearing this embroidered dress, traipsing through the desert. It's really dark out. I kept getting caught on the brush and some thorns of the cacti. And I think I was making the joke that this was the type of content that anthropology wishes that they could capture. And we ended up all perching ourselves on some boulders in the desert, and there were coyotes yipping in the background. And it really felt like Earth was our spaceship. So you can imagine, I'm telling this story in front of a crowd of people at our launch party, and I'm talking about being on mushrooms. And I'm talking about being on mushrooms in a recreational space. And, it scared my mom. At that time, she hadn't had much exposure. It was really only just, a couple of years ago. But I think to answer your question with this anecdotal story, it's that people don't have exposure. And, yes, maybe some people might read an article here or there, but I think you and I and, our cohorts live in a bubble. I think that we have been able to experiment with different psychedelics. We've talked to friends about it. We've read about it. I've gone on tons of forums for many, many, many years online to learn about things. And I've watched documentaries. You, with your podcast, you get to interview the most incredible individuals, experts in the field. But I think what my mom showed me is that it's scary. If you're not educated, it's really scary. And I think people fear what they don't know. And fear is this huge human reaction that holds them back from that edge. That edge that you're talking about is hard to get access to if you feel so much fear. And since that time, both of my parents, I haven't gone to Burning Man, but both of my parents have gone to Burning Man. And, they have smoked weed now, and, they are very much huge supporters of everything that I do and talk about, and so loving. But yeah, I think it comes down to being afraid of not knowing what's going to happen, not wanting to get out of your comfort zone. The edge is scary.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that experience. And I could picture you standing up amongst all of your colleagues and peers and at that. And yeah, that the fear and the programming that our collective has been given since really the Controlled Substances Act of 1971 and all the propaganda and the need for patience, because like you said, we can be, and I find myself, having to step outside of my echo chamber and outside of this because I'm getting all of this reinforcing information. And so I'm often feet on the grass and listening to, the latest Rick Doblin podcast to know, like, all right, where are we at here? And, to slow that exuberance is something that is a pitfall of wanting to share this joy, this capital J joy, and this bliss and ecstasy that we feel in these experiences, and then also integrating them in the day to day. It's I know that's something that I struggle with, is this, hey, everyone, this is, this path can be amazing. It certainly isn't for everyone, but as Michael Pollan says, the pitfall is, fervent evangelists of the obvious, like, hey, let's love each other. Hey, let's feel good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. Totally. And I think also, there's a lot of external forces that are still against us. I mean, this is really petty, but our company's Instagram was taken down not because of cannabis, but because I started to get on more podcasts and write more articles about design in the psychedelic space. So, I'm very much an expert in design. I'm very much an expert in weed. And so I started talking about cannabis is part of a psychedelic experience. And if you want to create a brand, I know a lot of people keep saying, well, what's going to happen with mushrooms? That's definitely the next thing that's going to turn into a brand and be sold commercially. And, I want to make sure that it's done right. So using my expertise in the branding and design space, I just started talking about it. So things online started to get reshared, and I was pictured next to some mushrooms, and it was posted on Instagram, and Space Coyote's account was tagged, and it got flagged, and our entire account on Instagram got deleted. And it's petty because at the end of the day, that Instagram account did not affect our sales. We were very lucky, in cannabis, it's all about dispensaries, and you can't really do anything online anyway. It was just this reminder that my bubble is that this is all okay. This is all okay to talk about. It's okay to share. It's wonderful to create community around these conversations. Psychedelics are the future. It was just this reminder of like, oh shit, like that is not what the rest of the world thinks yet. How long is it going to be until people catch up? And it feels a little bit like the cannabis industry a few years ago, where coming out that you smoked weed, coming out online that you smoked weed was such a big deal. But I like to be humbled and reminded that there are still tons of people that don't want to show that they smoke weed online. And that is essentially like a coming out of the closet. And now that we've leapt to psychedelics, as well, we're just ahead. And that's why your podcast is so important.
Yeah, thank you. I feel everything you're saying, and it's I think therapeutic at some level to hear your thought processes and how you deal with being out towards this edge, as it can be very heavy, and but and then to feel this impulse and the calling within that this is something that has to be done. This is a calling and service work, and showing up for the movement, showing up to be the best versions of ourselves, so others can, it's, I think a big thing with this collective shift in natural medicines and the cannabis movement and the psychedelic movement. I mean, there's so much that is coming along with that, the holistic health and fasting and flow states, and Brene Brown's work around vulnerability, the paradoxical power of vulnerability. And there's so much that is accompanying this, and it can be very heavy to wrap our hands around just how much this work could potentially mean for the masses that are struggling and stuck in self-abuse and stuck in depression and stuck in PTSD and limiting belief scarcity programs. So again, I want to honor and applaud your angle and outlook.
Thank you.
Well, I want to be respectful of your time also. So I have a final question here. What is your vision for our human family in the next, 5 years or so? What do you envision, and what drives you? We didn't get to that first kind of that, you shared the Joshua tree, but is there, was there a moment perhaps on your path that really stands out as, and I'm thinking right now that time out in Joshua tree is a pretty epic freaking moment. So silly question, but yeah, your vision, what do you see and how do you see all this playing out in let's say the next 5 years?
Well, I think next 5 years, I really want to see Space Coyote be a national brand. But what I'm really curious about, that's very personal. I'm really curious about how every state deals with psychedelics. We're seeing the decriminalization happen in some key places, which is so exciting. But I'm curious, and I should say nervous, about companies starting to sell psychedelics, specifically mushrooms. I see a lot of companies gearing up to be able to sell them to the masses. And I just really want it to be done right. I think in one future-looking reality, I'm seeing there be this microdose movement because that's what the government regulations will most likely allow. You get a box or a bottle that has a bunch of microdose stacks. They're probably going to be with adaptogenic mushrooms as well as, psychoactive. And I think I'll probably say, like, take one if you want a microdose, take two if you want this experience, take the whole bottle if you want a hero's journey. And that's going to be all great and fine. But I think that there's going to be this like sort of sneakiness of it's all microdoses, but trying to still encourage people to take the 3 grams or more. But, I'm very much looking at things from the branding perspective. I just don't want it to be bastardized. And I don't want people to be manipulating the government regulations, because then the messaging and the education of what a psychedelic experience is will really get muddied. And so, that's one reality that I see happening, that we're very much going to be leaning on the microdosing is allowed. So all the brands are going to be microdosing. But yet there's this secret message that you can just take the whole bottle. Other reality that I see is 5 years is not long enough. 5 years, maybe we don't even see federal legalization for cannabis. I hope to God that we do. I really hope that we get to see federal legalization in the next 5 years for weed. But, in a way, cannabis is that gateway drug that people were so scared straight by in the 80s and 90s, because I think once cannabis goes federally legal, then psychedelics can really step up and we can really fight for them. But if there's any sort of delay there, then, we're just all going to be playing a waiting game. And then my biggest concern is that any industry that goes mainstream, I'm doing air quotes for mainstream, it turns into this money-making capitalist race. And I really don't want that to be the case for psychedelics. Hopefully there are going to be really fantastic legislation and regulations put in place for healing centers. I'd love to see that. I don't think people will really at first be able to guide themselves. I think the average person is not going to know what to do. And I don't want someone to, go into the dispensary equivalent for psychedelics and buy some mushrooms and have a bad time because they weren't educated or because they got some misinformation. So we just have to tread lightly. We have to keep having a lot of conversations. I think it's important, I think at the beginning of this show, I said, I'm not an expert in psychedelics, and I'm not. I very much try and just be part of the conversation. I think the more that we have people using their voices to lend to this conversation, the better we will be. I mean, wouldn't it be wonderful if at some point my mom just started talking about psychedelics with her friends? It's individuals that are going to make change. We can each be little catalysts.
Thank you so much for that. So much goodness. I'll unpack a little bit. That what I'm hearing is just a plea for patience, and we're in a critical time, and the microdosing. Yeah, I think the microdosing, the Wim Hof method and breath work, the science around flow states, the science around fasting, those strategies, those ideas are what is going to keep us grounded enough where we can stay patient and we can still access these states of mind and still pull these knobs and levers, but to hold out and to again be patient for everything to unfold in divine timing. That notion of the catalysts that people making decisions to heal and to cross the chasm, so to speak, and doing it in a responsible manner as stewards, since there's a lot at stake here as we're potentially close, although like you said, it could be 5 years or longer for some further legalization in terms of the federal cannabis and psychedelic medicines to follow. So I do applaud your outlook and your insight and your gracious expression and how you lead and love by example with the work you're doing at Space Coyote. You do radiate beauty and show that softer side of life and fun and play. And thank you for your gracious expression.
Yeah, you're so welcome. This was a great conversation.
Absolutely. So great having this time with you, and keep up the great work. And where can people find you? I'm sorry.
It's a good question. So you can check out our website at spacecoyote.org. We did make a new Instagram account after that account was taken down. It's Space Coyote Official. It's funny, we're also on TikTok, though. I'm very new to that platform. There's always new ones, right? I feel like I'm almost about to turn 30, and I keep getting these reminders of, I'm totally going to be one of these people that's not keeping up with the times, because here I am not really wanting to be on TikTok, but we are having a lot of fun on TikTok. That's the Space Coyote. You can find me on Instagram at Libby Cooper. And this is a fun one. My co-founder and I do a live stream on Facebook every Thursday. We've been doing it for almost 3 years now, and we've got a lot of people that view that. It's on the Herb page. And I hope to hear from you listeners. And if you're ever in California, go to a dispensary. We're carried in dispensaries throughout the state, and just ask for Space Coyote by name. And we've got an amazing and delicious suite of products.
Wonderful. I'll be sure to put all that into the show notes. And if I'm in, or when I'm in California, I look forward to trying your product. And thank you again for your time here and your gracious expression, and keep up the great work.
You're so welcome. Thank you so much.
My absolute pleasure. All the best, Libby. That was wonderful having that conversation with Libby. Please check her out. Please check out Space Coyote. And if you are in California, head over to one of those 250 dispensaries and pick up a joint or two. Let us know how it goes. So much love to all of you. Thank you for the support. Till next time. I am thrilled to share with all of you. I have a few spaces left in my Worthy Fight one-on-one empowerment coaching. What is my coaching about? Demystifying psychedelics, igniting hope, and fast-tracking personal growth. Who is my one-on-one empowerment coaching for? People with bold, conscious ideas, ready to go all in on their next level growth. What do you get from my coaching? Weekly, high-flame coaching sessions where we dive in and aggressively confront the limiting beliefs that stymie your dreams and fullest expression. For those willing to put in the work in the day-to-day, 10x growth is on the table. That's right, transformation 10 times faster. And what is a byproduct of living on purpose? An unimaginable mind-body-spirit harmony that comes forth when we are fully rooted in our what and why for the work that we are here to do. We aren't meant to do this alone, and coaching helps us move through our obstacles and challenges more efficiently. Together, we lean in and walk through the fire of transformation on the path to you owning your greater role and bigger purpose in this movement. There are a lot of things I don't know, but when it comes to transformation and matters of the spirit, I am battle-tested and hold this space and duty as sacred. If you're ready to ignite your accelerated personal growth, reach out. Again, I have a few spaces left. Time has gotten tight for me with the Worth the Fight mission and message of hope and healing heating up, but I can take on 1 or 2 more clients. So much love to you all. Peace. Thank you for listening to the Worth the Fight podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, please leave us an iTunes review. These rate reviews help us expand our circle of influence and serve more people. If you haven't subscribed already, please do so. We have many more inspired guests in the queue. For more information on the Worth the Fight mission and message of hope and healing and what we are up to, head over to worththefightbook.org. We appreciate the love and support. Till next time, love and peace.